Welcome to No BS Parenting. My name is Pamela. I'm the mom of two fabulous young men. I'm going to cover everything parenting on my channel, and I do not recommend that you watch with your young kids. Let's do it. Welcome back to No BS Parenting. My name is Pam. Bullying. Have you ever been bullied? Have your kids been bullied? Is your kid the bully? This is a topic I think that can hit everybody personally. I know for me it does. I was bullied for a huge part of the beginning of my younger years throughout grade school. Here in Canada, in Quebec in particular, our grade school goes up to grade 6, high school 7 to grade 11. And for me in grade school, because we moved around so much, I was always the new kid on the block. And when we moved to a particular town here in Montreal, I was definitely the new kid. They labeled me as the spick, and I lived the realities of what it is to be singled out just because you're different or new. And I got to tell you, from a child's standpoint, there's nothing worse than that, especially if your life at home is less than perfect, as mine was. Being bullied outside the home is even worse. So I want to talk about it today because I think that it's with social media and access to the internet, we're getting more and more of a picture of the impact that bullying has. And today, because of the internet, there's a whole new dynamic to bullying that didn't exist when I was a kid. Why do kids bully? What happens in a child's mind where they feel like they feel the need to victimize other kids? We see it even in adults. It's not just children that do it, right? Look at the President of the United States, fucking Trump. Just saying that between you and I gives me, it actually makes me want to hurl. That jackass is President of the United States. In any case, he's the poster child for what a bully is. He goes out of his way to minimize, degrade, insult, and put down reporters, women, minorities. You know, all of us spicks, we're all murderers and rapists. Women, obviously for him, yeah, grab him by the pussy. He does that kind of stuff. He talks like that. Why? Because he can. So I want to talk about an example like a Donald Trump. Why does someone end up to be such a jackass? I think that there's a very specific reason. Why do other kids end up bullying? I think it's important that we talk about it because as a society, I find that we tend to deal with the effects after the case. We try to put fires out instead of trying to prevent them, and I think that's our biggest mistake. I think anytime that you're dealing with anything like this, you got to look at the source of what the problem is. So in the case where right now in today's society with all the access to the internet, kids are not just bullied now in the schoolyards and in the bathrooms and in the street, but they're bullied even when they get home, because their kids are constantly connected, right? They're always logged on in one form or another, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, or anything else. They're constantly connected, which means that their bullies have access to them on a regular basis. So I think that it's even tougher today than it was in my day. There's a lot of I know that here in Quebec we have hotlines. There's a hotline for teens, a suicide hotline. There's even a hotline for parents where parents can get tips on how to deal with it if your kid is being bullied or if your kid is the bully. I think that we don't need to ignore the side that is dealing with the after effects or trying to stop the bullying once it started. But I do think we need to be more proactive and try to stop it before it gets started. When they give tips to the parents and say you go to the principal, go to the teacher, get it stopped where usually it starts, which is in school. I can tell you from experience that the bullying doesn't happen when the teachers are in the vicinity. It happens in the bathrooms. It happens around the corner in the schoolyard where there's no adult within earshot. That's where the bullying picks up, and then it follows you outside. In my case, because I was the new kid on the block and we had just moved to that part of the neighborhood, the kids are mean. Their kids can be cruel, and they went out of their way to gang up on me in numbers and kicking, punching, all that kind of stuff, throwing it to the ground. Even the boys got involved. A boy's picking on a girl. Go figure. There's some great parenting tips that went awry somewhere. So I personally think that dealing with the school in itself, making it their responsibility, the school administration, is a mistake, because the momentum has already started and there's no way they're going to be able to be around all the time throughout the day when the kids are on their school grounds. I think that's a massive problem, is that today, there's so many fucking psychoses, and we've got a title for everything, and there's a drug and a pill to fix everything. And everybody's so willing to try to find something that is the easiest fix, instead of looking at themselves and taking responsibility and saying, okay, what do I need to do to fix this problem? I think that not enough parents do that. It's much easier to say, oh, well, the school should have done something if they saw my kid picking on somebody. Really? All that shit starts at home. As I mentioned before, cyberbullying has made it so much more complicated. It's the kids, they have no escape anymore. It literally finds them at home. And how many kids do you know are able to really disconnect when they get home off of their smartphones or off their laptops or their pads? It's rare. The kids are connected all the time. So they can never feel like they escape it. And that aspect, I think, has even increased the suicide rate for kids who are being bullied. In the research that I've done to look up that aspect of bullying in the 21st century, I realized that once I had gotten to number 40 on the list of young people who have killed themselves due to bullying, and specifically cyberbullying, I realized what an absolute epidemic it is. The youngest child that I found was 9 years old. Can you imagine a 9-year-old feeling like there is no way out, that the only way for them to escape that feeling of isolation and victimization was to end their life? Imagine the parents, the guilt that they have after, they should have seen, they should have known, they should have done, it's so easy, hindsight's always 20/20. I think that we need to make sure that we look at who are the kids that are bullying, and why is it starting? Why are they doing it? So usually one of the biggest things that I saw was because of homosexuality, that kids who are gay that come out or were found out, even if they didn't have enough guts to come out, that they are a huge percentage of kids who are bullied. Another thing, obviously, as in my case, was race, that you're the new kid on the block and you look different than everybody else. And that's the focal point of the theme behind the bullying. And then there's kids, like even in my case, that I had the second side, which we were fairly poor when I was a little girl. So I wasn't wearing the nicest, fanciest clothes. I was wearing, my parents shopped at Salvation Army to clothe us, as I did with my kids when I was a single parent. Unfortunately, I was going to the secondhand stores because it was all I can afford. So when you're a kid and you're not wearing the latest styles, the latest labels, that automatically kind of gives you a bullseye, unfortunately, here in the Western world. So those are the reasons for them, or the themes anyway, the flavor of the reason for the bullying. But I want to look at the source of why kids bully. In my opinion, there's a few different reasons why kids bully. In someone like Jackass Trump, in his case, this is the perfect example of parents who do not parent, who overindulge and don't hold their kids responsible, and never, ever, ever make their children earn anything, and make their kids believe that they deserve everything and anything just because they have a pulse. It's the perfect example of why Trump has turned into such a jackass. That is, in my opinion, the biggest mistake that his parents made. And you see it in everything that he does. So when it happens, and I can guarantee you, I would almost bet my life on it, that when Trump was a teenager and before, that he was already bullying kids that he saw as below him. I would bet my life that he was doing it. So that's just one aspect. Another one is, obviously, if kids themselves are being victimized at home and being bullied by parents, siblings, whatever, at home, I can tell you from experience, it makes you feel like you are absolutely helpless, like you have no power at all. And I think in a lot of kids, it makes them want to find a way to take back some of that power. And since they can't do it with their abusers, they're going to do it with someone like them who is easy to victimize. They're easy for the parents to victimize because they're children. So it's easy for them to victimize somebody who is shy or insecure or smaller or whatever. So that's unfortunately turns into their way to try to take back their power. And then there's the other reason that I think that it happens, and I think that it happens because children are exposed to, within their family and their immediate environment at home, people who have very prejudiced views, racism, sexism, misogyny, all of that stuff. I'm sure if you hear your parents speaking like that, which obviously in my case makes them bullies, that's a learned behavior. You learn that that's okay to do it, and to talk like that, to think like that, to victimize, to point out, to isolate. That's the other reason that kids do it. So I think that's where we need to target. I think we need to go towards the parents of the bullies, and go after them. And go after them. I don't want to sound like we're gonna have a lynching mob that's gonna go and follow and find the parents. That's not what I mean. I think that has to be the source. There are some people who are very vocal about it, and they have their own strategies on how to deal with bullying. There's a gentleman by the name of Brooke Gibbs, and I love his philosophy. He believes in fighting bullying with kindness. So he goes to high schools, and he does these workshops with all the kids, and in an auditorium setting, and has one of the kids come up to the stage with him, and they do role playing. So he has one of the kids play a bully and start giving him insults, and then he retracts and responds in the way that he feels would minimize, decrease, and erase bullying. So the kid would say something like, "You're ugly," and he'd say, "Yeah, I'm having a really bad hair day, but you look great." That kind of thing. That takes a lot of guts for a kid to get up. Let's say in real life scenario, and I could tell you from my personal experience, you're someone bigger than you, or you're being surrounded by a multitude of kids. They're insulting you, they're pushing and shoving. Usually it's not just words, usually they put their hands on you. And for you to come back with compliments to them, that's a really hard thing to do, and I don't think that in real life scenario it would work in every case. I'm not saying that I don't think it's a good way to handle it. I do. I actually love that, the idea of killing them with kindness. I think it's a great idea, but I don't think that it would work in every case. There's another gentleman that I found from Texas. His son was being bullied by a boy. He decided to go to the parents and spoke to the mother of the boy that was bullying his son. She gave him permission to speak to her son. For him to find out that he had kind of befriended this boy, found out that his parents had separated, that him and his mom and his siblings were homeless and they had lost everything. He was wearing very tattered clothing. So this dad of the bullied child had the two of them kind of sit together and talk and work out their differences. And then he took this boy shopping and created this GoFundMe where they were raising money for the family. That is, if all problems could be solved that way, that's optimal. It would definitely be a utopian option. But I highly doubt, unfortunately, that most parents are going to do that. They're going to actually go out of their way to improve the life of a kid who's bullying theirs. I highly doubt most people are going to do that. Although I love his philosophy and his standpoint on it. In my opinion, what I think we're not doing that we should do is we should be, when it's proven that there is a child who's bullying, who's victimizing, I think that automatically the child and their parents should have to take courses on empathy, on inclusion. The parents should have to take classes on parenting, how to parent effectively, the real repercussions of the things that they say and they do. Because I don't think that we're holding the parents accountable. You're going to hear me say this over and over again on this channel. The buck stops here. Think of every horrible thing that exists in society. From people that rape, murder, the bullying aspect that we're talking about today. All of it comes from those people's childhoods and the way that their parents fucked them up when they were kids. In almost every case, you can link it back to that. So I think that as parents, we don't realize, again, how important it is to be conscious of what you're doing, what you're saying, and how it's going to impact your kids and what kind of adult it's going to make them. In my case, my boys, I made sure that they always understood. If you see bullying, stand up to it. Don't be a silent person in the crowd. When I was finally reached an age that I was tall enough, big enough to be able to fight back. It's exactly what I did. I don't recommend that everybody takes this stance, because I got into a lot of scraps in the first couple years of my high school, because I just decided I wasn't going to take it anymore, and I started fighting back physically, and got into some pretty heavy scuffles between the ages of, I would say, 12 and 14. And it stopped. It worked. It's unfortunate that I had to do that, but in my case, that was the solution. And I didn't just do that, but I had, because I knew what it felt like to be the victim of bullying, I had absolutely zero tolerance for watching someone else being victimized by a bully. I couldn't stand back and do nothing. Every single time I saw it, to this day, at the age of 48, every single time I see any instance of bullying, I am incapable of standing back and doing nothing about it. I have to put my 2 cents in. I have to get in the middle. I have to do my part to try to stop it, because I don't think it should be tolerated in any instance ever. I don't. And in one instance, when I was a teenager, I almost got my ass kicked. The biggest, toughest girl in the school was picking on a girl that, there's always one that everybody says she's a slut. And when I walked into the changing room by the gyms, and she was on the floor, this girl crying, and they were all surrounded her. And the biggest, toughest girl was hovering over her. And I walked in and I got in between, and I very gently asked her to back up, and, don't do this. What is she? She's crying. You already have her slobbering on the floor. You've made your point. Back off. It's enough. I remember thinking, this girl is going to kick my ass. And I could be picturing it. I had a vision in my head of her cleaning the floor with my face. It didn't end up that way, thank God. She kind of backed off, and we became somewhat of friends after that. So when I was around, the effect that it had on me, always putting myself between the bully and the victim, was it actually stopped when I was around. People didn't victimize anybody when I was around, and I think it had something. It had to do with everybody just thought, oh, that one, she's so annoying. She's definitely going to get involved. So people